In A Song of Ice and Fire, killing dragons is pretty hard. That's quite understandable. It's a medieval setting, and these are giant, fire breathing lizards with wings. Not really anything else can fly in this setting, and given that fact, pretty much only dragons and old age kill other dragons. However, there is one house in Westeros that can claim to have killed a Targaryen dragon, other than House Targaryen themselves, who've killed a fair few. That house is House Uller in Dorne. I've gone in depth on a few families in Westeros before, and I really haven't looked at Dorne, so I figured the only house that has been able to kill a Targaryen dragon was a great place to start, as last year I talked about House Peak, which is the only house to kill a Targaryen king and still be around. House Uller has some very interesting history and lore surrounding their both past, present, and some of the elements of their castle itself. I'm really interested to talk about a few elements here, as there are theories regarding certain aspects of their history that I have been wanting to talk about for quite a while. So let's jump in. Let's first discuss their coat of arms and castle. Their castle is known as Hellholt, which, first off, just one of the best names of a castle in A Song of Ice and Fire. It's on the river called the Brimstone, which I guess ties into the entire hell motif of this area. Fire and brimstone, and the fire could likely be supplied by a dying dragon. It's a really cool castle and river name, and the name of the castle itself does have some historical or at least legendary origin. It's named after an event not dissimilar to the Red Wedding, in which the rivals of House Uller were invited to dine at their palace, locked inside of it, and burned to death. Kind of similar to the Red Wedding, but if the phrase burned down the twins with the Starks inside instead. And this event was what inspired the coat of arms that currently is the symbol of House Uller. Specifically, that being these kind of red flames on a yellow field. And you'll note, because this is a Dornish house, they have a circular, I almost said logo, circular, not banner, coat of arms type thing, given that the other houses in Westeros tend to use shields, and this pretty unique region that wasn't initially part of the Seven Kingdoms does tend to A, do its own thing, and B, have its own sigils. There are also some pretty interesting connections to kind of the root of Dornish history within House Uller. Specifically, Nymeria, the individual who was able to kind of unite Dorne under House Nymeros Martell, was at one point married to a member of House Uller, given the fact that she had multiple husbands after the death of her first husband of House Martell. They were essentially rewarded with this thanks to siding with Nymeria in the war against House Ironwood, which was kind of the main conflict that Nymeria encountered in Dorne. So it is interesting to see that the Ullers did have some pretty significant connection to the woman who is credited with binding this portion of the realm together. We then arrive at the event for which this video is titled, and for which House Uller is the most famous, that being the First Dornish War. We know that Dorne did not bow to Aegon during the initial conquest. It was only a region of Westeros that was able to remain independent thanks to various tactics of guerrilla warfare. However, once the rest of the continent was united under the Dragon Kings, Aegon turned again southward and attempted to claim this portion of what he deemed to be his domain. This event, called the First Dornish War, was very influential in Targaryen history, as it is the first time that we see any kind of gap in the armor of Targaryen power. Specifically, as the Dornish are being assaulted for years and years during this war, Rhaenys Targaryen, one of the two queens of Aegon, goes to assault Hellholt in the year 10 AC. Meraxes, her dragon, is flying overhead, and while she is assaulting the castle, a bolt is loosed from a scorpion atop one of the towers, and it goes into Meraxes' eye, killing the dragon and causing both the dragon and her rider to crash to the ground immediately. The techniques of the Dornish had always been very positive for dealing with dragons, but pretty much those techniques had just amounted to hiding in the past. This is the first instance and only instance of an actual weapon made by man being able to kill a dragon, unless you count the hands of the peasants during the riot of the Dragon Pit and the Dance of the Dragons to be made by man weapons. But I mean, kinda not. Scorpions are much rarer in the books than in the show. The show kind of uses them as a main method of dealing with dragons. That's something that's pretty commonplace these days. As Qyburn kind of comes to this realization, Bronn shoots Drogon in season 7, and then later we see Rhaegal killed by one of them, by Euron, in the final season. I think the third to last episode of Game of Thrones. In the books, it's unlikely that that'll actually be the case. Firing a scorpion from a ship is stupid, and I don't don't think Martin's going to do it. And anyways, the Greyjoys have a massive dragon horn, and that's going to be how they're going to attempt to bind a dragon to their will rather than killing it with some scorpion that is very tangentially related to their part of the kingdom. I really couldn't think of a culture more different from the Dornish than the Ironborn, so giving them scorpions really makes no sense to me. I don't want this part to drag on, but you should like the video and subscribe and all that stuff, and comment what's your favorite house in Dorne. I'd love to talk about more of them other than just this one. I talked about the Danes a little bit, but there's definitely a lot of room for potential videos there. Let me know. While Meraxes was certainly slain by the bolts loosed from the top of the Hellholt, there's some questionability as to Rhaenys' fate. The queen was supposedly injured, at least, by the fall of Meraxes, but there are many rumors that perhaps she survived and was imprisoned in the Hellholt. It's really unclear as to how that might be the case. There is a very mysterious incident later on that marks the end of the First Dornish War, that being Aegon Targaryen receiving a letter from Dorne and essentially fleeing to Dragonstone immediately thereafter to think, and then abruptly ending the war. No one knows what was in this letter, but many have speculated that it's, hey, we have your sister and queen here in Hellholt. She's being tortured. We'll stop torturing her if you stop burning all of our citizens. That could be a pretty good incentive for Aegon to stop the war, and I think he very much would do that given his supposed love for Queen Rhaenys, at least compared to Queen Visenya. We do know that during the Dornish War, before this letter actually makes purchase and finds Aegon, the next 4 heads of House Uller are all killed, because the Iron Throne places a massive bounty on each of them, as killing a queen is a big no-no for the crown, and this is a period known as the Dragon's Wrath, as the kind of anger and fury of House Targaryen is fully unleashed on Dorne after killing one of their own. That is sort of the last we hear of House Uller until the main story. The Dornish really have no role in the events of the Seven Kingdoms until they are brought into the fold by Daeron II and kind of Viserys II. I'll die on that hill. But regardless of that, that means they don't participate in the Dance of the Dragons, they don't participate in any of Maegor's wars. They might have participated in the Blackfire Rebellions, but Martin has kept elements of the Blackfire Rebellions very hush-hush, given the fact that there are future Dunk and Egg books, hopefully, that will cover some of them. So overall, House Uller does kind of vanish from the historical record, but they do have a pretty significant role to play in the latter 3 books of A Song of Ice and Fire. While there is no legitimate member of House Uller who appears in the show, there is a fairly important member of House Uller who is illegitimate, who does appear in the show. That being Ellaria Sand, the paramour of Oberyn Martell. The 4 youngest of his daughters, the 4 youngest Sand Snakes, are with Ellaria Sand, as she is kind of the main squeeze of Oberyn at this point in the story, and she does play a pretty massive role in the show, and at least somewhat of a role in the books. The Sand Snakes tend to play a larger role than she does in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, but both her and the Lords of the Hellholt are present for several events throughout that point. It's also worth thinking about the fact that we're really unsure as to the potential lineage of House Uller. If Rhaenys was potentially alive at that point, there could be a chance that some of the current day Ullers have maybe, to quote Brown Ben Plum, a drop of the dragon in them. So that could be interesting to see, given that the 4 youngest Sand Snakes might have some tiny Targaryen lineage, though I really doubt that would come into the story at all, unless some of these tiny Martell bastards are going to start riding dragons. One more interesting connection exists between the Ullers of Hellholt and the Targaryens. While we don't know the Ullers' official house words, we do know a common Dornish saying about this family. That being that half the Ullers are half mad and the other half are worse. This bears direct resemblance to the very common phrase regarding Targaryens, being that every time a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin and the worlds hold their breath. It very much makes sense. It kind of shows these 2 houses are known for being a bit touched, and it does kind of lend further credence to the idea that maybe there is some relation between the Targaryens and the Ullers, via the connection with Rhaenys potentially being captured many years ago. It's also worth noting that House Uller has a pretty massive part in Arielne's Queenmaker plot, as this takes place in the 4th book, A Feast for Crows, and this is her idea of essentially crowning Marcella Baratheon as Queen of Westeros, instead of Tommen. She wants to do this crowning at the Hellholt. The stated reason is the supposed closeness of the Ullers and Oberyn Martell, which does very much track given the kind of relationship between him and Laria Sand, who is an illegitimate member of this house, but could also have some bearing the fact that one queen was struck down at the Hellholt, and Aerion is hoping to raise another at this same location. It could give an air of legitimacy to this cause, should they ever make it there, but unfortunately they don't, because Aerion digs after her father, and her scheme blows up in her face. The last time we see any of the Ullers is at the Feast in the Watcher chapter of A Dance with Dragons. Specifically, a toast is made to King Tommen, and we're able to get kind of the lay of the land in Dorne by seeing who accepts this toast by essentially praising the king and who pours out their water or do not drink. It's not water, it's wine, sorry. But the main thing there we learned about House Uller is that they do not drink the wine. This shows that they are pretty steadfastly against the current Lannister regime, and that could speak at least somewhat to their idea of maybe supporting another cause, maybe supporting Aegon specifically. As I have discussed in the past, that Aegon Targaryen seems like a pretty decent candidate to be a Dragonslayer, especially if he gets Dorne on his side, so I could see him wanting to bring the Ullers into the fold as the only house that has successfully killed a Targaryen dragon with a scorpion. I could see him borrowing their scorpions and hopefully killing one of the dragons of Daenerys Targaryen himself, or with the help of the Ullers. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, what have you. It really helps me grow the channel, and it just feels great for me to see that people like it and want to support what I'm doing. I'll have much more content in the near future with the very imminent release of House of the Dragon Season 2, and I look forward to sharing all of my thoughts and feelings on that season and theorizing it with all of you. Thank you all so much for watching again, and I will see you in the very near future with many more videos. Goodbye!